Hi guys, I'm here today with Megan Bond from Complete Transitions, and Megan has worked with me on several occasions to help clients that we're working with either pack up, downsize, declutter, stage their home. There's not a lot Megan doesn't do, and her team is amazing, so I wanted to invite her here today to talk a little bit about giving you some tips on things that you can do right at home. Hi, Megan. How are you?
I'm good. Good to see you again.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So, Megan, can you first give a little intro about your company and how you got into it?
So Complete Transitions is a move management company and a home staging company. We started out primarily with move management. We started in 2017. As in with most move management companies, we do focus primarily on seniors. And I got into the business like a lot of us do when my own family, my in-laws were going through the downsizing process and moving into a care community and needed help with those processes. My husband's 5 years older than I am, and he's 10 years, the youngest by 10 years. So my in-laws were just a little bit older than a lot of my friends' parents were. So as they started going through that process, I started making lists and getting involved, and eventually it became a company. It became associated with the National Association, took my formal training, and that was the beginning of move management.
2017.
Yeah.
It seems like it's been longer than that, Megan.
Yeah, it was. Well, that's when we became officially a company in 2017. And then, we've been doing move management and helping clients, because they're all moving, helping clients with the process of staging in a much more informal way. Right. And finally, in 2020, we said, let's formalize it. Let's give it its own branding. Let's go through formal training like we did for move. Let's do all that. So we separate the two,
right,
and market them independently.
Yeah. So over years, I started working with you when I was in senior living.
Yep.
And over the years, you've worked with hundreds of clients that were moving into the community where I was working.
Yes.
And that's how we got to know each other.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I got into real estate, it just was like a natural transition because I already knew the quality of your work and your team and what you could do for all of my clients.
Right.
Not just seniors.
Not just seniors. Yeah. We do, the senior communities, as you know, when you're on that side, they understand that the downsizing process can be a difficult move, but that doesn't mean there's not reasons for move management, even if you're not a senior. One of my favorite stories was of a client. She was in her 40s, but she was the primary breadwinner. She had a toddler, and her husband was just going through cancer, and she had her plate full. Like she needed someone to be her alter ego through this move that they were making. And so, there are reasons why people use us besides just seniors.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And listen, I don't know why anybody wouldn't utilize that service if they're able to, because it is so stressful. They say, that moving is one of the top 5 stressful events in people's lives. And you and I both know that that's true. And it
absolutely
doesn't matter how old you are.
It does not matter.
And a lot of times it even revolves around other things that are stressful, like suddenly you're an empty nester and now you're downsizing and you want to choose a home that is more suited to your needs. Or maybe you've just gotten married or you're in the process of getting married.
Correct. Yeah.
So or maybe you're having a baby. So there's lots of things that
we have done people. A few baby.
Well, yes,
we have done a few baby moves along the way.
Yeah, we have. Yeah. So one of the things I wanted to ask you today is, do you think you can give people some tips on when they're preparing to move and they're thinking about moving, how can they start the process of honing in on decluttering, getting rid of the things that they don't need to take with them, and preparing the rest of the stuff to move?
So decluttering, that becomes like the word clutter itself becomes like a very sort of pejorative word. And so it's hard. That ad, like we become nose blind. Mm-hmm. We also become blind to like our stuff. It's just natural. I was away for 5 days, as you know, and I came home and I looked into my living room And there was this pot that has artificial greenery in it.
Right.
And it's on a stand. And I looked at it and I was like, the greenery's faded.
Right.
The stand is faded.
Yeah.
The pot's fine, but I don't really like it. I was like, it's just been there.
Yeah.
Like it has its own gravity. So it's just been there. It's always been in that corner.
Yeah.
And so we become blind to the things in our house
100%.
because it's just been there and we're just accustomed to seeing it and it being there. So, I retract things from my house constantly.
Yeah.
But that's a hard thing to do unless you're really working on it.
Yeah.
And I think having someone come into your house, whether it's a stager, whether it's a really honest friend, whether it's, and point out to you those things that are, I'm not going to say clutter, I'm going to say superfluous, like not necessary.
Right.
Like they don't need to be there. And not everything has to have a need per se. One of my favorite quotes though is from a William Morris, who sort of was the Martha Stewart / philosopher in England. You can still get William Morris patterns, but he said, have nothing in your house that you do not believe to be useful or think to be beautiful. So I'm not saying that everything has to be, have a need, but there are things in our house that are there just because they're there.
Yeah.
And so starting to clear out that, because none of your buyers are buying your things.
Correct.
Like they're not.
Exactly.
They're buying the woodwork.
Right.
They're buying the windows. They're buying all those things. So there are things in our house that don't need to be there to show and really should not be there. So we can show the buyers the flooring, whatever that is, the windows, the trim, the mantle, all those things. Like we don't need to have 70 things on there. So, thinking about it in terms of from taking away those things that are extra. And as you know, and we've talked about with other clients, it used to be different. 20 years ago, the first showings of a house would be to real estate agents on a real estate caravan. That's gone. That's long, long gone. Everybody's first showing is going to be
online.
And and it's probably going to be on their handheld device, right? And so it's going to be a picture that's about this big. And so some things that look fine when you're in the room, like you're in the room, that looks fine.
Right. But we know on camera, in a picture,
this big,
it looks totally different.
It looks cluttered. It looks extra. Right. So I think having somebody to come in and, take more of those things away than you may feel naturally comfortable with.
Right.
So, there's always the traditional pack away all your, personal things, all those things.
Right.
But I do think it's beyond just that, and having somebody who can help you with that process, whoever that is.
Right.
So I think a stager has been professionally trained how to do that. Yes. But I think there's a lot of ways you can get that information and start reducing those things that are in your home, so we can, again, have the buyers focus on the house and the product that is the house as opposed to your belongings.
Well, I would actually slightly disagree with you on this, because for me, one of the things is the staging. Now, not every client is in a position to be able to do the staging and to do everything that I recommend that they do, right? And we do different things. So we have different levels. If they can paint, if it needs paint, or just a few touches here and there, like frequently we'll do things where you're just adding.
Yes.
You're just adding a touch here and there to showcase the home. And those things, the reason why new construction uses staging is because it works so well.
It does.
Right, exactly. And I feel like having an honest friend, there's only so honest a friend can be, right? And plus, they don't know the same things we know.
Absolutely.
And I am a realtor, so I know this needs to look different and we need to change it up a little bit, but I don't know exactly how. And so that's why I rely on somebody who that is their profession. That is what you do. And you can walk into a room, look around and be like, boom, 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 boom. And that's why I'm like, we need to call Megan. So,
the difference is that we have been through proper training.
Right.
And so, I think your biggest thing for any homeowner is to do your due diligence on your real estate agent.
Yeah,
I mean, really,
absolutely.
long before, do your due diligence on your real estate agent, because, and please don't hire Susie next door or Jimmy, my nephew, or any of those kind of things. There are ways that we can do referrals to Jimmy, the nephew.
Right.
But, you know, for most of us,
Right.
this is our single biggest financial asset.
Exactly.
And so hiring the proper professionals, all of them, if you can't, you know, hire the best real estate agent. That's not, and then what that real estate agent is able to provide for you or suggest to you, they will work within the budget that you have.
Right.
And they will work within what you are physically able to do.
Right.
And then sometimes they'll outsource what they physically can't do. So sometimes, you know, we do come in because we pack as part of move management. Sometimes that's what we're doing. Like, we have decided collectively that a number of things need to be packed, and we're going to go in and put and pack and placed in a place that is appropriate for this house, for showing this house.
Exactly. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about some of the things that we've done together and how it's made such a huge difference. So I was working with a client who I was fortunate enough to have these people who were 100% on board with anything that I recommended. And I was so excited about it. We started, I'm going to say this was a couple of years ago, and we started in the mid fives of where they were going to list their house. And then they did the things that I asked them to do with the painting and the touching up and the landscaping and the little bit here and there. And when we were done, I said, how would you feel about staging? And they were not on board at first, but once I explained to them why I felt it would be a good idea and what a big difference it would make, they agreed to it. And once we staged it, we bumped up the list price we bumped it up $75,000.
Right. And so that is,
and it was huge.
In that case, the layout was a little unique.
It was a unique layout, and all of the rooms were not being utilized in the way that I knew the buyers would be looking for.
Right. Right. I mean, so at the end of the day, like, people, why staging? You know, what is the best possible scenario for a seller? A best possible scenario for a seller is multiple bids, right? Like, that's the best possible situation for a seller. So how do you get to multiple bids? You have a good agent, obviously.
Right.
But the other part of that is you make that pool of potential buyers as big as possible.
Right.
You make it as big as possible. So you don't want to go in and say you have a room that is very specific and niche, and it's used for you as a home. That's wonderful as a homeowner. I am all for,
I do that.
Using a house or a space as you want to. But from the financial, from the part of this is now an asset that we're selling, biggest pool possible. And don't let, so I've probably done I've been intimately involved in probably 700 people moving.
Right.
I would tell you, out of that 700, probably 30% of them will say something after they know who's buying their house, like, that's not who I was expecting the buyer would be.
Yeah.
Right? Because we come with our own prejudices about our neighborhood, our house, or this or that. And they're like, that's not who, including the biggest house we ever worked on, a 20,000 square foot, beautiful, beautiful mansion on multiple acres. It was beautiful. They also said, never would have expected the people that bought it to be the buyers for that house.
Yeah, it's
because
interesting.
They had they had built it at a very specific point in there. They had built it. They'd done the architect. That they had a very specific idea of who the buyer should. But we, as sellers, and that's what a good real estate agent could say, no, this is not necessarily going to be an empty nester. This could be a first-time home buyer. This could be, this could be a divorcee. This could be a lot of this could be somebody just looking for a different living environment. So making that pool as broad as possible is what staging does. It takes out a lot of the niche and the specifics and makes it a palette that lots of people can see potential living uses for
Right.
those areas.
Right. Because when you're selling a house, you're basically telling a story about the potential years that the buyer could spend in that house. And you want to make it as appealing as possible. So you have a realtor who's going to have all the people in place to be able to tell that story to the fullest.
Right.
And attract as many buyers as possible. And the most important thing is to create an emotional response, because that is what is going to really sell the property.
Right. We just talked about this with a different client. Like, there's that statistic that says people make a decision in 30 seconds whether they're going to buy the house. And stagers love that statistic.
Yeah.
Stagers love that. I'm not completely convinced about that statistic, but what I am convinced about is people make a positive or a negative evaluation about the property within the first 30 seconds.
They know if they're not going to buy it.
And I also think if they've got a positive and they start seeing the positives.
Right.
And if they go in with the negative or whatever, they start adding up the negatives.
They're looking for negatives then.
They're looking, they're adding it up. That's where their mind has shifted to. So you have to keep them on the positive. And the thing that most people don't know, the average, and why should they? I mean, the average person should, is the smallest thing could be offsetting to somebody.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
so
absolutely.
Somebody, I remember seeing this house, and it was a lovely house and really had things, and there was a Christmas tree.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like,
yeah,
like,
no holiday themed.
Like somebody might, who's not Christian, might go in and be like, oh, this is all, this community is like this. They're going to make an assumption. You don't want them to make any of those assumptions.
Right.
Now, somebody might say, well, somebody might have a positive reaction to the Christmas tree.
And that's true.
And that's true. But again, we want to go for
as wide as
possible.
Right.
And the Christmas tree people that are positive about that, they're not going to be negatively impacted that it's not there.
If there's not one.
Right.
Exactly.
So again, and I mean, that's why we say even beloved local sports teams.
Exactly.
We still recommend, because you don't know I mean, I have a guy in my neighborhood who flies his Jets flag, proudly, no matter what. Like maybe he has hope this year, but so, and so for him, maybe going into an Eagles themed room is not seen as a positive. So we really try to take anything that could potentially be seen as controversial, questionable, and whatever, so that they're not focusing on that.
Right.
And they're again focusing on the house.
Right. Because really, I mean, there's not a lot of things that couldn't be seen as potentially controversial, I feel like. And I tell people that if you walk into your house and you feel like it's totally empty and you can't see any trace of who you are, then it's just right.
Right.
It's ready to go on the market.
Right. And nobody lives like that. So,
no.
And I understand people are like, well, staging scenes can't. Well, it's kind of, a perceived version of a super tidy, super neat house.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. And, is that canned? I don't know.
But it feels a lot better when you're walking into a house like that than when you're walking into a house that feels like, on several occasions, I've toured homes with buyers who we've walked in and they're like, geez, they must not want to sell or value their home very much because it's clearly they haven't done anything to make it presentable.
And that is what, they perceive that as. And they take it to, even if it's just messy on the surface, they take that to, is it been cared for on a mechanical, kind of, and those two you might say, well, my house is perfectly, I have an air conditioner. But the perception
it's all about perception.
And there's another statistic that stagers love that I actually do agree with, which is 90% of the people can only see what's presented in front of them.
100%. I agree with you.
And so because people are like, well, can't they see beyond my gigantic whatever it is? Or, and I say, oh, well, 10% of the population can. But now, again, we've taken that pool.
Of 100% down to 10%.
I'm the 10%. And I can tell you don't want me as a buyer because I know that I'm in the 10%.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking to make a deal because I know that I can see beyond it. And I know that. So you don't, that 10% that can see beyond it, that may not be your, the buyer that you really want to target. You need that 90% because if you want that bid war, you need that 90%. So you need those people who can see beyond, who can see what's there and imagine their lifestyle in it.
Right. So going back to those clients that we worked with, and then they sold their house for even higher than the list price. They had so many bids on that house. We were like amazed at how many people. I mean, one person actually cried when she went through the house because it was everything she had envisioned for her family's future. It was ideal for them. And I'm not saying she necessarily wouldn't have loved the house if the sellers hadn't done all of the work that they did, but I'm not saying that she would have either.
Yeah, there was a very, it was a wonderful family with a bunch of very active boys.
Yeah.
And it definitely had that, that feel of some very active boys, and they were great kids and all those things.
Right.
But, we want people with little girls. We want people that don't have kids.
Right.
We want people that, that maybe haven't even started a family yet, that are, we want all those people to be able to imagine themselves in that space.
Yeah.
If you ask your neighbor next door, they will have experience with their one move, and they may have gotten the A team from that moving company, and they had a great move.
Yeah.
But you don't know who the team lead was. Like that's so nuanced into the moving community. So they don't know who the team lead is. Whereas a real estate agent who has seen, hundreds of people move and have had hundreds of people report in on the activity of the moving company and can say, oh, consistently I've had a great experience with this mover, as opposed to another moving company where, sometimes it's good. I mean, we know moving companies like that. Sometimes it's good.
And sometimes it's not
so good because it depends on who you got that, more experienced team versus less experienced team. So I think real estate agents are my go-to for real estate agents, for recommending moving companies.
Yeah.
Move managers, obviously, we're involved in moving all the time. But anybody who's involved in moving on a regular basis, who has seen multiple movers under multiple situations, that's always my recommendation for a mover. I do tend to like family owned. But that doesn't necessarily.
It's only because, maybe it's because, from my perspective, that's because with family owned, you typically have like a core group of people.
And you have a lot of owner operators.
Yeah, exactly.
At least partial owner operators.
Yeah.
And so it becomes a little bit like, there's one moving company we work with all the time, and it's a wonderful company, but it's corporate owned. And there's often a disconnect between what happens in the field and what happens on site.
Yeah.
Because there's a very corporate process, whereas the person who goes on site for one of our other moving companies, he's could very well end up on the truck that day. So he's not going to do any, he's not, oh yeah, I knew about those low hanging, branches or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So that's the one difference I can say.
From my perspective, I would say as a realtor, my greatest asset are the people around me.
Absolutely.
And the people I put in place, not necessarily that are employees of mine, but different companies and people that I work with consistently over time that I know are going to provide the same value to my clients that I provide and have the same mindset about service.
And will come at 7 p.m.
Yeah.
Anytime.
Exactly.
I can come now.
Yes. Like, Megan, I need you right now. And I know you're in the midst of going to Texas because one of your children's getting married, but can you just stop by this house
now? I think
exactly.
I think for a lot, it's true for us too.
Yeah.
Like having a group of reliable movers, that's the obvious one, but having a group of reliable
haulers, having a group of reliable people to do different niche parts is a huge part of the asset that we provide. And that's why going to somebody who put their shingle out, and I'm like, hey, like 2 days ago, and you're like, that people are like, one real estate agent, something like another. No.
Right.
No, that's not the case.
Well, that is a common misconception that they're all the same.
Yeah.
It's not the case at all. And I don't think that's true of anybody in any profession.
In any profession.
Yeah.
So I don't know why realtors get that.
I don't know. Why do we get the bad rap?
I don't know. It's really unfair. I do think it's unfair because just like with any profession, and what I really don't understand, and there have been times where I've just had to bite my lip because, here is one of my senior clients who we're working on with Move Management, for example, who is selling their single biggest asset.
Right.
And they're like, my best friend's daughter just got a real estate license. And I feel like I have to use her. And I'm like, okay, like,
can you just interview like 2 other people?
And and it's not, that's unless they ask, if they say, do you have a recommendation? Do you, I'll say that sometimes I've gotten a little bolder as I've gotten older and been like, okay, have you considered other options? You can do referrals, you can do things like that. But not all agents are built the same. And do your due diligence, ask around. And again, don't just ask one person what their experience was. I feel that way about movers. I feel that way about real estate agent. When you know that you have an agent that is consistently referred, then you go, okay.
Right.
And you can, they offer, different ways that they're willing to say, hey, check my credentials. I want you to, because I know that I will stack up without a doubt with my history and what I can bring to the table.
Yeah, I agree. So I find that I have a lot of clients who are not sure. So it's very tough to time your sale of your home and the purchase of your next home perfectly.
Yep.
In fact, I'm working with a client right now who she is going to move in with her mother probably for a couple of weeks between the time that her house sells and she moves into her next home. And she's trying to figure out, and we've been talking about the pros and cons of packing everything and putting it in an actual storage unit versus having somebody come pack it into like a pod or something like that and store it that way and then move it. I tend to feel like the latter is a better option because it's less work. You're not.
My biggest thing that I usually recommend is having your movers do the storage.
Okay.
So there's something in the moving industry called care, custody, and control.
Okay.
We are responsible for things. We as the packers or the movers are responsible for things while it's under their care, custody, and control. The minute it's no longer under your care, custody, and control, they're not responsible. So let's take just going to a traditional off-site storage facility, public storage, whatever, pick your favorite.
Right.
The minute that door closes, the moving company closes that door, boom, it's no longer in their care, custody, and control. So if there was something that happened to anything in there, you may not know about it until it comes out of that storage unit.
And then it's too late.
So if you store with your moving company, then it is under their care, custody, and control for the entire time. And so they are responsible. So you haven't lost that continuity.
Right.
Now, and it's not a lot, cost-wise, it's about the same. The only difference I would say is if you're going to be in storage for an extended period of time, moving storage is not like having your own storage unit where you can just go in and out.
Right.
You can't just go in and out of your moving company's storage and get your stuff. So it works well. But I have, even with staging clients, we have done packing, or even sometimes had the moving company do partial packs. And they say they've had too much furniture. So we had this situation. Client had too much furniture, too many things, but was going to be living in the house with a family.
Okay.
So they still need to be able to function in this house.
Right.
With a family, real estate agent had come in and said, too much furniture, too much this,
Yes.
too much that, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So we packed all of that, and we had the moving company come through and take round one.
Wow.
Take it to storage.
Okay.
And then the house was zhuzhed and staged.
Right.
And they could function in it. It
Right.
still had, her kids' beds were still there.
Right.
Yes, she had a little procedure that she did to make sure, the brushes weren't out and all those
Right.
kind of things. But they could still function in that house. She also her husband had already moved to the new location.
Oh,
so
geez.
she was a single mom. Like she had her
Right.
hands
She
full.
had, yeah.
And so we showed it with the less furniture that the real estate agent had recommended, and we'd done in our staging report. And then when the house sold, we matched it all up, and then we did one move down to West Virginia, as opposed to doing two moves. So the local Philadelphia company picked it up. They stored it locally in Philadelphia, held it,
Right.
and then when it sold, picked up Part B, merged them two, then took it down to West Virginia. So we've done stuff like that before with clients. So I'm a big proponent of storing with your moving company.
Well, that makes sense.
But it's not always the answer.
Yeah.
And sometimes pods make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Sometimes, it depends on the house.
Right.
And the way and again, your real estate agent is going to tell you this, but sometimes you're not packing up that kind of stuff like we just did with a client where we just packed up some boxes and it went into the garage.
Yeah.
It was tidy and neat and put to the side.
Right.
And the photographer's not going to photograph the garage.
Right.
And buyers just want to know there's a 2-car garage that
Right.
it's going to fit. Okay.
Lots of boxes in the
and
garage
that's
is
fine.
not a
And
deterrent.
for I have to say, for a lot of buyers, it's like, oh yes, they're moving.
Right.
And
they're
like,
ready.
ready.
That actually makes them feel better to know
does.
that there's a garage full of pre-packed
Yeah.
things.
And they're like, okay.
They feel comfortable knowing that the buyer or
This
the
is gonna go
sellers are
through.
serious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Long time ago when I was young.
Oh,
And
you're
we were-
still young.
And we just talked about my daughter getting married. And that daughter was probably a toddler. We looked at maybe a little older than we looked at moving, and we were trying to stay in a specific area. And we went to go look at this one house. And again, I was young and not in the moving business at the time, but I literally walked around this house and thought to myself, they'll never get out of here. And it was a huge deterrent to us with that house. And I can still remember that house to this day. Like I still have a very strong visual. And now I know you can hire a moving company and they'll pack up whatever you want.
Right.
But at the time, my 30-year-old self was like, they'll never get out of here. And it was, a lot, what you see a lot of times with our buyers, it's somebody who'd lived in a house 30, 40 years and had a lot of things in their home. And I couldn't visualize this would ever materialize.
Well, I've done final walkthroughs or pre-final walkthroughs with clients who are purchasing a home and it doesn't look like anything's been packed. People shouldn't worry too much about that because they will vacate almost always.
They will vacate. They will. And it's amazing what there are, actually, if you go onto YouTube, you can pull up YouTubes of moving companies going on site to what they are expecting to be a packed house.
Right.
And there's one where the guy's like, we need you to send boxes and it's going to take us a little longer. He's so calm. Yeah. He's so good. Props to him, but he's so funny on the phone. And, from a perspective of, you can see this house that is, there's food out, there's clothing out, there's whatever. And the guy's like, we need some boxes and it's going to take us a little longer. I'm like, oh, you're going to need a team to get that done. So it does happen. But from a buyer's perspective,
if they just feel so much like better,
a negative thing. That's why the extra clutter, the extra items in the house.
Exactly. Thanks everybody so much for being a part of this today and for watching. And Megan, thank you so much for being on my podcast. It was great catching up with you. And if you want more information from Megan and Complete Transitions, if you want to speak to her, why don't you go ahead and tell people how they can follow you and get in touch with you? Our
website for the Move Management Company is Complete complete-transitions.com, and that you can get into the staging website that way as well. That has all our contact information, info at Complete Transitions, and telephone number and all that good stuff.
Yeah. And Megan's amazing. I've worked with her for many, many years and have always been thrilled with your work.
It's amazing.
Always.
We're so young that we've worked together for so long.
I know. But 2017, it seems longer than that.
It does.
Feels like forever ago. Yeah, exactly.
We doubled our time.
Yeah, we did. We did for sure. All right. So thank you, Megan, for being on the show.
Thank you.